All right, welcome everybody. Happy New Year, and welcome to the very first episode for 2025 of Sales Pipeline Radio. I'm your host, Matt Hines. Excited to have you here for another year of great content, great guests. Super excited to get this ball rolling. If you are joining us live in the middle of your work day, in the middle of your work week, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to be part of the show, you can do that. If you have a comment, a question, a rebuttal, a rant, throw that into the comment section of YouTube or LinkedIn. We will see those. We can reference those. We can bring those up and discuss those as well and put those on screen. So thank you so much for being part of this. If you are listening or watching on demand, thank you so much for downloading and subscribing. Every episode of Sales Pipeline Radio is always available, past, present, and future, at salespipelineradio.com. Today, very excited to kick off 2025 with my friend Jim Huffman. He is the CEO and founder of GrowthHit and one of the smartest marketers I know. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Dude, Matt, pumped to be here, man. It's a great first week of the year to be here.
So you, I mean, I've known you for a while. You did a workshop on digital marketing and sort of helping to sort of drive demand and pipeline in Seattle that for the Entrepreneur Network we're both a part of, that I think had one of the highest ratings of any workshop in recent memory, which is a very high bar to set, but I think also sort of is indicative not only of your expertise, but also the importance and just how popular and on demand that content is. You know, it seems like we've been talking about digital marketing for a long time. The playbook continues to change, right? And so I'm curious, maybe for those that you don't know who you are, maybe talk a little bit about your background, and then we can get into sort of the changing landscape of sort of what the digital channels look like.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, your talk was pretty awesome. Adam Weiler and I were comparing notes on it. It's fun to have some light bulb moments go off. But yeah, so me, I have GrowthHit, growth marketing agency. I started my career in finance, looking at spreadsheets, and then that didn't take me too far. So got into marketing, and you started this agency about 8 years ago, just kind of accidental. And I was kind of obsessed with a couple things. One is this idea of growth hacking at the time in growth marketing, which essentially is just full funnel marketing. And the second thing was like conversion rate optimization, which I actually hate the phrase. It's just doing experiments, doing A/B testing. Mm-hmm. And so when you're doing A/B testing, when you're looking at full funnel marketing, you're able to have a bigger impact on the business, on a sales pipeline, on driving revenue. And so that's been kind of an obsession over the years for seeing like how you can come into a company and add those two mindsets to try and help them, one, unblock growth, because people want to grow, but it's like, are you even ready? And then second, something you talk about is like, how do you get to this holy grail of predictable revenue or predictable sales, as opposed to you're like, holy smoke, something worked. What happened? Let me look at the Google Analytics, and how do I replicate that? So that's something I've been really into.
Well, and so this concept of both growth hacking and CRO has been around for a while, and sort of I think in B2B, it's a mixed bag historically, right? Where like we know that a lot of our buyers are online, we know that there are journeys we can manage there, but oftentimes it's complicated. It's a long sales cycle. There's multiple people in the buying committee. So it's not like a click conversion from search is going to close the 7-figure deal. So how do you help clients put in context the importance of continuing to leverage sort of digital and sort of conversion rate optimization and continuing to improve performance there with the complexity of that B2B journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing I do is like, I have people ask themselves a question like, do you know what's actually stopping you from growing? And it's like a scalability assessment, if we want to give it a fancy marketing headline. And I usually say it's one of three things. So if you're thinking of like your Q1 goals, why might you not be getting there? Is it one, positioning? Are you in a sea of sameness and you're not standing out? So before you start doing ads, before you start optimizing the funnel, it's like, let's get that dialed in, right? And so there's a whole path we could go down there. The second is, I like to start bottom of the funnel, is conversion. Do you know how to activate people? Is your sales funnel about booking a call? Is it a demo? Is it product-led growth? Do we need to drip them content authority before we go for the jugular? Or is it about speed and being able to take a call today because it's a cybersecurity breach and it's go time? Yeah. Or the third thing is, maybe you have a traffic problem. And when I say traffic problem, like, do you have a lever you can pull to double traffic and double sales? Or are you a one-trick pony and you can only get it one way and we can't diversify? And so that's like the first thing I'm doing is like, okay, where is there high impact of those three things? And then from there, I'm starting to assess like, okay, where can we have an impact? And I'll pause there because there's different ways we could go. But the first thing is like assessing where are we at? Like where do we need to have like our lasers focused right now?
Well, a focus is the key of that, right? I see a lot of companies that are spending a lot of money on digital marketing, and they're really just focused on volume, and there isn't enough precision around the right people. And even in a B2B space, I find that can be less. It's sometimes a culture change, Jim, to be able to help people get away from the most clicks for the lowest possible cost and say, I'm okay with fewer clicks if they're the right clicks.
Yeah.
So how do you help clients balance quantity and quality in a healthier, predictable, repeatable way?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And it's one, you said this in one of your talks. You said a stat that has been living rent free in my head since we spoke, where it was like, 70% of the time someone makes a B2B purchase, they're going with the first person they spoke to, the first person they heard of. So what does that mean in relation to your question? It's, as we look at 2025 planning, we need to have a kumbaya as far as here's our shekels to put towards marketing. How much is going to direct response? I can see ROI today versus how much is going to stuff where we don't know attribution. And by the way, if we do, it's not going to happen for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Right. And that's a huge culture shift. So that's one thing, is having that kumbaya. And by the way, reminding people. The second thing that I think marketers and salespeople, it can be really tough to create a culture of messing up, failing, and testing. So the other thing I like to do is like, hey, of our growth calendar that we're going to do, what are the things where it's okay to mess up? It's okay to learn. And maybe it's 5% of our budget or time, or maybe it's 25%. But knowing that we're planting seeds, because right now we're doing a lot of stuff with AI that could be viewed as tinkering and failing, but we're planting seeds for that. So those are like two things I like to try and get on the same page with the client or with the team. Because if you do, you're setting the foundation to really build a rock star growth team that can test and learn. But if you don't, oh man, you're going to have some tough conversation in 90 days where it's like, where's the ROI? Why didn't that campaign work? And that's a tough environment to work in.
I wrote down culture of messing up because I actually think that is really important. When you move from saying, I want the most MQLs, the most leads possible, to saying, I want the right leads, you are retraining the board, you're retraining the leadership team on what the marketing scorecard might look like. And if you look at your marketing team, you might find someone on the team that knows how to do the most leads at the lowest possible cost, that is focused on CRO purely to get higher yield. And now you're asking them to focus on quality as well. That's a different thing. Now, if you don't address the elephant in the room, which is like, we don't expect you to know how to do this right out of the gate. Even though there are a bunch of companies you can learn from, this company, this industry, this moment in time in our growth curve is unique. Right. Back to the hard thing about hard things is no one has done what you're doing before. So as a leader, how important is it to balance? We need to generate results with providing some grace and patience around the process to get there.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's like one way I like to do that, where I'm a big fan of the book. It was a blog post turned to a book. You could probably just read the blog post, but Amp It Up by Frank Slootman on how you can like turn up the temperature to go faster, but also do it in a way where it's a safe place to fail. So what I like to do is it's the reverse dashboard, like an action tracker, where it's like, hey guys, it is okay to mess up. We're going to be tinkering. We're testing AI, and that is fine. However, where I'm going to hold the feet to the fire is the reverse dashboard. And for us, an example of that is how many experiments do we run in a quarter? Whether that's landing page experiments, email experiments, whatever that is. And that's where I track. So for us, we say 12. I want to do one per week because I believe if I have the team that's testing and learning, the input will result in the output that we want. And so that's one way of trying to be like, okay, I'm giving grace. I'm making it okay to mess up, but I'm going to be pretty hard on, we need to have that input. And candidly, like with GrowthHit, our agency right now, we put a lot into stuff where it is immediate ROI results. And I'm even having to drink my own Kool-Aid as we invest more in content marketing and things where I'm basically like, I don't care to see any ROI on that in the short term. But it's something that, we had to get buy-in, and it starts with the top.
Talking today on Sales Pipeline Radio with Jim Huffman. He is the founder CEO of GrowthHit, talking about conversion rate optimization, talking about improving digital performance, but doing it in a way that drives the right traffic, the right pipeline, a repeatable, sustainable way. I think, you mentioned earlier the stat, and I'm going to get the numbers slightly wrong. I'm going to ballpark it. Shout out Carrie Cunningham, who did this research in the early fall. But your buyers don't want to talk to you until well into the buying process. Like 73% of the buying process is done when they're willing to talk to sellers. They don't want to talk to you before then, but like you said, Jim, they will work with the first company they hear from. They're more likely to buy from the first company they know. So you'd say, well, those are counter to each other. Well, they don't want a demo early on. They don't want a sales call early on, but they will learn from you early on. The ability for you to educate, to teach, to challenge the status quo, to be a trusted advisor is enormous. But here's the rub. If we're following that data and believe that data, those early engagements are not going to immediately convert into pipeline. Mm-hmm. They're not going to immediately convert into form fills. They're not going to immediately convert even into leads. And so now I have a problem justifying this behavior inside an organization that is measuring me based on leads and pipeline. Mm-hmm. How do we balance that? And how do we try to have a better conversation internally that respects the buying journey, but also respects the work that has to go into the eventual pipeline building?
Right. It's so much around expectation management with the voices in the room, right? Because if they just think you have this big green growth button that you smash and then you're drowning in leads, that's super dangerous, right? And so it's getting alignment there. And one thing that I like to do is with these experiments, it's what persona are we going after? Because I was guilty. We were so good at going after bottom of the funnel searches. I need a CRO agency today. We crush that, but guess what? That's quite easy. And so it's okay, this is X amount of resources are going to that, but we're down with looking at more top of funnel metrics, page views, email signups, and knowing that will kind of pay dividends. But two kind of tips to think through there is what's your seasonality of your business? When is it demand capture time versus demand creation time? So what that means is we see a lot of demand going into Q4. So it's not about doing a white paper to talk about growth strategy. It is time to close. Mm-hmm. But then there's other seasons where it's a little bit slower, where I absolutely want to lean into that. But you also want to be oversharing these insights and data with your board, with your team, to get their buy-in, so they really see the big picture. Because if all of a sudden it's February and leads drop and they don't understand that, those are some awkward and hard conversations to talk about as you're looking in the rearview mirror. So expectation management, showing the big picture, we call it the growth calendar, the 12-month growth calendar, so people really understand the recipe you're putting forth.
Well, and I think increasingly, thankfully, we're seeing companies that have been the early adopters of this effort and are seeing the manifestation of the metrics we talked about, right? Where they have greater advantage. Just like if there's someone's going to buy something and there's 3 vendors, you don't have a 33% chance. You have a 65% chance of getting the business because you were there up front. And so that investment earlier increases conversion rates, and that's how they then justify that early work. There's math there that CFOs increasingly are saying, yeah, I buy into that. I want to see more of that. But that takes a leap of faith and courage and discipline to lean into. We're 14 minutes in this conversation, Jim. We haven't talked about AI at all. And I think, obviously search is one of multiple components of a demand strategy and leveraging the digital landscape. What are you seeing now, and what do you expect over the next 12-ish months? I realize how fast things are going and how hard that is to predict, but as so many marketers are trying to figure out how to manage their digital marketing in 2025, what's your perspective?
Yeah, it's so fun. Like there was a talk I went to, the book AI First. Andy Sack was a part of it, and talks about being this AI first company and what is like the foundation of that. It's like, what's your tech stack? What are your guardrails? Building an AI council to start playing with it. So we've started doing that, and here's some of the things we're seeing. It's like we're basically looking on a client by client basis and understanding from a scale perspective, where's the biggest impact, right? Obviously, it's great with copywriting, from ads to landing pages to email. That's quite simple, right? The other thing, some clients with imagery using Midjourney, it's been really interesting to accelerate the work there, and with some of the video work that's still been a little spotty. But honestly, where I'm getting really intrigued is starting to build databases and get really smart with how we could approach those. So, for example, we are looking at location-based services where we create a scraper through Google Maps where we can scrape all the locations. We can then use a screen grab tool where we pull every web page. Then we bring in AI to basically do an assessment of those pages. We're then funneling in Google reviews to then do an AI-based voice of customer search component of that. The next question is, what do we do with that? I don't know. We're trying to figure that out. But it's like we're tinkering and we're playing with looking at what we're doing and how AI can make us like 10x better. And the last thing that I'll say on this is, for me, I found it be a really good thought partner whenever I can be in a conversation. We use Read AI to take notes from it. We import all of our notes to like a custom GPT, but then I'll basically be like, okay, take the role of like this amazing growth hacker that understands product-led growth or ABM. And before you come with the strategy, ask me 5 questions to give you more context before you give the recommendations. I think Jeff Wolf's book, AI-Driven Leader, inspired that. So those are things that have been really helpful. But again, I'm kind of dancing around this question a little bit. I would say we're still in tinkering mode. Like we're building custom GPTs for clients, and it's interesting, but I'm not sitting here like nailed it. Like here we go.
I sense, and I know we're running out of time here, I sense a frustration amongst some marketers and go-to-market leaders that say like, we've been tinkering for a while. Why don't we have something that's scalable? I'm like, well, this is all moving really fast. The rules change on a regular basis. Some people have figured some things out and quite frankly aren't willing to share it because it becomes sort of their sort of like special sauce to do things that no one else knows how to do, and they don't want their competitors doing it. But as frustrating as it is, I think it is still tinker time, right? And I think that, is even as you identify things that can be done relative to copy, relative to editing, relative to data analysis, or even to sort of product marketing analysis, every new release unlocks something new that can be done, and there's going to be tinkering happening for quite a long time.
Totally. And sometimes I worry, like we have a solution looking for a problem, and I've been guilty of that. And I'm trying to think of the end goal of like, okay, what's the problem I want to solve, and how can this do it faster or better? Because like we would do these demos, like, oh, look at this cool thing it can do. It's like, okay, awesome, but what are we doing with it again? What's the application? So that's something we're trying to stay honest on.
Yeah, and I know some folks that like spend a lot of time doing that tinkering and saying, here's what it can do, here's what it can do. And they will admit, like, I don't always have the application, but what I want to do is surface the capability. And the more people do that, the more we watch and listen to them, some of us are going to be able to say, oh, that solves a problem over here that is the last puzzle piece to be able to do X, Y, Z, right? So I think it's mud season, right? Like, we're all sort of tinkering and it's not perfect, but we need that innovation. We need people that are tinkering without outcomes, right? I think that the problem without a solution is a good thing, because if we talk to each other about it, we're going to figure a lot of things out more quickly. Jim, we got to run. We got to wrap this up a little bit. For people that like what they're hearing and want to learn more from you, about you, where should they go?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Jim Huffman. Website's just growthhit.com, and I'm Jim at growthhit.com. I respond to email way too fast. It's unhealthy. So I'm around.
Email Jim. He'll get back to you within 15 seconds is what I heard, 24/7, any time of the day. Jim, you're the best. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Great to see you, man.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching today. Happy New Year again. Very excited. We got a great lineup of topics and speakers and featured guests over the next couple of weeks, so stick with us. We'll see you next week, next Thursday, on another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. Until then, take care. We'll see you then.